So good morning, everybody. My name's Matt Webb. I'm Head of Enterprise Data at UK Power Networks, but today representing the Energy Networks Association. Also joined by Jess Hampton from One Spatial and Carsten Roensdorf from Ordnance Survey. So I can just go to the next slide, please. So there you go, lovely pictures of the three of us. So moving on to the next slide, thank you. So what we are here today to talk about is something called the National Energy System Map. So this is a collaborative project being run under the Energy Networks Association, which has been instigated by the work done by something called the Energy Data Task Force. So this was commissioned by BEIS and Ofgem, the government departments, in 2017-2018, and they published a report that is effectively aimed at promoting accelerated digitalization and utilization of database services and processes across the energy sector. Now, the report's quite extensive and covers a number of areas, but ultimately it culminates in 5 key recommendations that you can see listed on the left-hand side there. What this particular project aims to deliver against is that 5th objective that's highlighted, visibility of infrastructure and assets, the definition of which just sits below. So effectively, it's about improving accessibility and the user experience around how end users and data consumers access and navigate around network and asset data from both gas and electricity network operators. So the project effectively aims to bring together all gas and network operators at transmission and distribution level within the Great Britain area. Potentially was going to include colleagues from Ireland and Northern Ireland, but at the moment it is just Great Britain. And effectively, we are looking to integrate data sets, address a number of use cases, and we have engaged the services of Ordnance Survey and One Spatial to deliver that capability for us. Next slide, please. So in terms of the journey we've been on, we are currently in a proof of concept phase. So just a very high level timeline here, where we set up a sub-working group. So within the Energy Networks Association, we have the Digitalisation and Data Steering Group, which has representation from all network operators. There are then a number of sub-working groups covering different projects, and this is one of them. So subgroup was formed through an exploratory phase around scoping and specification. We developed a couple of very small scale demonstrators, and what we in particular did was reference other existing platforms, and in particular we looked at something called the AREMI platform in Australia, which isn't specifically focused on energy but caters for a number of different use cases across different sectors, but one of them being energy, and gives a really good benchmark about what we're aiming to achieve in the UK. So we did some demonstrators on that, used those to socialise and engage with stakeholders, obtain feedback, thoughts and opinions and views on what the aspirational UK version could and should look like. And off the back of that, we scoped this project, and we are currently in the development and delivery phase of the proof of concept. So it's been running for several months now. It's gone pretty smoothly. Had some challenges which we'll cover shortly. But ultimately, we're aiming to do a soft launch in July, August time, with a view to then rounding things off, doing some high level engagement with key stakeholders, and then doing a full launch of the proof of concept to have very, very broad stakeholder engagement and feedback towards the end of the year. And off the back of that, we hope to then move to full implementation of an enduring solution. But as you'll probably appreciate, there's a number of questions that need to be addressed and challenges overcome before we take that step. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick overview of what it is we're trying to achieve through the POC, in engaging with stakeholders, we quickly identified that there are, although it's a very, very large and diverse stakeholder and data consumer community that we are trying to serve, there is in reality, a number of sort of core objectives that are common across the piece, and that's what you can see across the top here. Most people want to understand what assets there are, where they're located, who owns and operates them, what is their capacity, their level of utilisation, their respective performance, and what opportunities exist in terms of either connecting to the network or freeing up headroom, effectively increasing capacity and improving utilisation. So with those things in mind, we've looked at defining a number of pretty broad use cases that you can see listed here. The first one being an overarching piece around visualisation of energy and distribution transmission assets. So targeting sort of those core areas there around planning, design and feasibility, asset protection, risk management, multi-agency coordination and safe working. Obviously, there's many things beyond that, but that's the core focus in terms of what we're seeing the platform being used for. Probably in an order of priority as you see them listed there. Secondly, it's about presentation of sites and associated supply areas. So we can have ideally a heat map type presentation to show the capacity and utilization type aspects and the opportunity to connect. Third, the ability to integrate third-party and open data sets. So effectively, this is saying, okay, we can present network data from the network operator, asset owners, but wouldn't it be great for the end user to also layer in their own data to look at the interaction and the co-location of separate data sets? So we're looking to facilitate that. And then finally, the presentation of connected distributed energy resources. So this aims to tie in with something called the system-wide resource register that we as network operators are required to publish, which is a very basic tabular format at the moment. So what we want to do is integrate those existing data sets to geospatially present them and just to give a greater user experience and access to that data. So that's a high-level overview of the project and its objectives. At this point, I'll hand over to Carsten, who will give you some insight into the approach we're taking and actually delivering.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So from the use cases, I think you can see that this is quite granular, quite detailed stuff, which really goes to the bones of the energy network, if you like. So how does it have to do with the with a sustainability topic that this conference is about? Now, I think when we look at the net zero future and sustainability perhaps more general, then I think there's a very clear expectation in the energy sector that particularly the electricity network, but also the gas network, will undergo very significant changes in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. And I think the general idea that the Energy Data Task Force outlined is that we need, in order to really make sure that is fit for purpose and can take the systemic changes that are about to come in terms of electric vehicle charging, in terms of renewable energies, which is going to be put into the system on a more decentralized basis, as well as storage of energy. And in order to facilitate this, the network operators currently already publishing a lot of information, typically on their own website. And you see two examples here from two different operators. If you click one more time, there should be a third image coming up. So you see individual points, you see kind of network information in terms of cables, you see color coding, you can get more attribution information in this example at the top about the constraints of a primary substation. Simple. If you, let's say, want to build a solar park area, you're looking for land in a particular area, or you already have access to land, then there's an important question whether you can actually connect this resource to the local network. Process would be that you need to go to the network operator and pretty much have a look at their own website and then into one negotiation process. The idea behind the system-wide view is that it would be not only really great, but I think really required for a national picture of this to emerge. So next slide, please. We are of the project implementation, and that means we can give you only a limited amount of kind of end results, but we wanted to lift the bonnet a little bit and tell you how we're approaching the project. And there are really three different and important streams. We have a legal stream. I will go into more detail on the next slide. The data the integration of the data from all the energy networks in the 17 different license areas currently in Great Britain and hopefully in the future in Ireland as well. And then there's something about use cases and platform functionality. So that's the actual application. And that really goes into the different user roles, whom can we give access to what kind of data, and then specific functionality which relates to the use cases that Matt outlined. There are two additional areas. One is called data triage, which is really the process that the ENA working group has put in place to data can be published and how openly data can be published. And we are having a particular look on an access control as well, because we're dealing with critical national infrastructure data. So Jess is going to talk a little bit more about the data normalization process. Let me just say that we created a harmonized data model, a data model that is capable of accepting network providers, and it provides, sort of the lowest common denominator of what the networks agreed on, how their data should jointly be represented. And to get data into it, we're using the One Integrate and One Data Gateway technologies from One Spatial. Next slide. So we wanted to put a little bit of a focus on the legal framework, because the problem is not just a technical one. It's a culture and it's a legal one. What I mean with culture is that data sharing needs a community in which data is being shared, and that's really the Energy Network Association and their members. And in order to make it happen, we've implemented a number of legal frameworks from the OSGB side before we went into this project, and a number of the templates and the ideas use of. And we're really having a three-stage process. So we're having three different types of legal agreements. So data integration licenses, which give Survey and One Spatial really the right to look at the data and engineer the system. So to develop the platform, the user interface, the data model, the data transformation. Then the second stage, the data distribution agreement, which is a publication license. So it will allow, in this case, Ordnance Survey as the platform operator for this POC to publish the network's data. And then the users need to sign or click through an end user terms of reference in the sense of a license agreement. And this is basically how this happens. From a platform perspective, that acts as a trusted data broker to facilitate data exchange between the variety of network operators in the 7 areas and a variety of users. Well, I think I'm handing over to Jess to tell you a little bit more about the technical side of the implementation, how things look like.
Real, thanks, Carsten. So as Carsten mentioned, we are still in flight with the project, and we were hoping that we would be able to show you the end system at this point. But unfortunately, we weren't able to get the permissions in place. So what's being displayed on the screen here is an early wireframe of the user interface. And I think what's important to note here is that it's the use of GIS to enable some really powerful decisions to be made. So at a very high level, this project is all about making sure that the right people have access to the right data at the right time to be able to make really important decisions going forward. So making sure that this isn't too much of a GIS heavy interface was important, and that's something that Ordnance Survey have been working really hard with to make sure that everything that is on that user interface is fit for purpose for what we're really trying to achieve with the national platform. Next slide, please. So the next thing that I wanted to talk through was really sort of the data journey and what sort of the implications on the asset owners that are involved in the project are. So first of all, we did a lot of work with the data owners to, as Carsten mentioned, build a model, agree what data is going to ultimately end up in the platform, but also look at the best way for them to be able to provide that data. And what we settled on is that there were 3 common data formats that they could submit data to us in. The reason that we chose this approach is that it really reduced the barrier to entry for people to be able to get on board with the program. So what we didn't want to do is be really prescriptive around exactly what they needed to provide us, which meant that people would have challenges both in terms of having the time to do it, but also potentially for some people the internal skills to be able to bring that data to the forefront for the project. So we have a really simple and intuitive user interface, which is a product called One Data Gateway, where the user can log on and they can upload a file into the system as long as it's in one of those 3 data formats. Then what will happen, we will run some transformation rules. So we will transform from the current schema and data model into our 2B model for the platform. And at that point, we'll also run a number of validation checks. So we're looking to say, does this conform? And if not, why not? And that report goes back to the data owner, which is a really important element of the project that we wanted to make sure that we could get in there, because that's all about improving the data within an organization so that there's more benefits than just I'm submitting to a national platform and there's all the user cases, but we're also really looking to continuously improve the quality of data at a national level. Once we've submitted the validation report, if we've transformed the data, we're in the right model, and everything's passed through, it will then get uploaded into the OS platform, which the earlier wireframe was a very early example of that. And that's where your end users will be accessing the data, so they will access through the end platform. So that just gives a very, very high level overview of what actually we're doing. And really for us, the key thing was trying to reduce that barrier to entry and make sure that we were as technology providers and solution providers taking on as much of the pain of the data transformation as possible, because we knew that was potentially quite a large concern going into the project. Next slide, please. And I'll let Matt talk about these a little more, but I just wanted to touch on it from a supply chain perspective. That really, I think that the way that the ENA have organised the engagement of this has been absolutely fantastic. So having the working group set up has been really fundamental to making sure that we have the engagement at the right levels within organisations, and really having a representative and an individual that is championing this within each organisation. That has helped with some of the things that have been challenging. So legals being one of them. Carsten's touched on it. I'm sure Matt will touch on it again. But one of the key things that has been maybe a little bit surprising and actually quite a big success is that we've been really successful in taking on that pain in terms of the data. So actually, from a user perspective, and the burden and the time that's gone into it to being able to provide that data, because of the way that we've designed the solution, has actually not been too stressful for anyone, and therefore we feel that we've done a really good job of making sure that we can engage all of the organisations, which has been fantastic. Matt, would you like to give sort of a network perspective as well?
Yeah, thank you, Jess. So just to round off, I mean, as a proof of concept, I think it's fair to say that most people, if not all on this call, will be very aware that the technologies to facilitate what we're doing are very well established and can do what we're asking of it without a huge amount of effort. The real proof of concept came in what sits below the waterline, really. I always consider this a bit of an iceberg, with the interface and the end solution being the tip, and all the activities that go on below the waterline, being where the real effort is involved. So Jess has spoken about that collaboration, the engagement bubble that you see there. It's been a real one team effort across the piece here, despite the huge number of parties that are involved, many different data owners with their own internal challenges and legacy issues to overcome. One of the key things that we put in place on that front, as well as the core working group, was representation or key representatives from each organisation covering functional requirements, technical requirements, and legal aspects. So that allowed us to really sort of hone in on target the right people, to have the right conversations at the right time, to allow us to move forwards. On the legal front, as Jess said, this certainly posed the greatest challenges. We always anticipated that it would. I mean, at the end of the day here, we're talking about open data, but also we have to balance that off with the fact that we operate as a critical national infrastructure, and therefore there are certain limitations in what we can share, how we share, and who with. So striking that balance has been a key consideration and something we've had to work through collectively. Equally, when it comes to establishing common agreements around data publication, use, and sharing, associated questions around liability and so on. Those are clearly things that have had to take a lot of debate and working through to land on a common agreement. But we are pretty much there now, which is great. And then finally, the data piece there has been the easy bit. It really has, and that's a reflection on both One Spatial and Ordnance Survey, the very good systems, processes, and capabilities they've got in place. And it's that approach that's very much making this project a success. So thank you.